Today you're going to be taking Cornell notes on the health of ecosystems. This is chapter 6 in your book. Remember that for Cornell notes, you need to draw a line about an inch over from your margin, and you're going to take notes on the right-hand side of that line. Then when you're done, on the left-hand side, you are going to ask questions that can be answered by what is in your notes. And then at the very end, at the bottom of your notes, you're going to write a summary about the notes. Now, one of my favorite cartoons is The Simpsons, and I'm going to show you a quick little intro video to some different things that can be unhealthy for our ecosystem.
The administration has declared recycling a felony, and Smokey the Bear is now Choppy the Lumberjack.
These trees are our national heritage.
A grizzly bear with a chainsaw. Now there's a killing machine.
Good Lord, acid rain.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling! Ah! It burns like a Glasgow bikini wax. Ah!
We better stay inside.
So why do we care about having a healthy ecosystem? A healthy ecosystem is important to all living things, including us. Ecosystems need to maintain some stability so that the organisms that live there do not die. All organisms are interrelated, so if one species goes extinct, that can have a huge effect on many other species because they depend on each other in some way. They're part of the food web, they're part of an ecosystem's health. So we don't want to disrupt the living conditions of other species. So some factors that promote stability are diversity. Diversity is so important because the more diverse an ecosystem is, the more stable it is. That means that there needs to be lots of different types of organisms within an environment because each organism has a niche or a role or a job that they play within that ecosystem. And if that job is taken away, if that one species is taken away, that can have a huge effect on everything else in that ecosystem. Now, there's a vocab word called a keystone species. Keystone species are a species that affects many other species, and if they disappear from that ecosystem, it could have huge catastrophic events. An example of that are the sea otters that we have off of the coast of California. Maybe if you've been to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, you've seen them. I'm going to show you a quick little video explaining what a keystone species is.
In 1966, ecologist Robert Payne realized that a single species can make a big difference. In the rocky tide pools he observed off the coast of Washington State, the species that made a big difference was the sea star. Many kinds of water animals lived in the tidal pools. When Payne removed the sea stars, which ate mussels, the mussel population multiplied. But most of the other animals in the tidal pool disappeared. Payne called the sea star a keystone species. This name comes from the stone in the center of an arch. If the keystone of an arch is removed, the arch falls apart. A keystone species has a big effect on organisms around it. The African elephant is another example of a keystone species. They pull down trees, break up bushes, make trails, and dig water holes. Their activities open up the forest for other animals and help prevent grasslands from becoming forests. Elephant droppings help to fertilize the soil. They contain many undigested seeds and nuts, which are eaten by baboons and birds. Elephants also spread plants to new areas. In fact, some seeds cannot sprout until they have passed through an elephant's digestive system.
What I'd like for you to do right now is I want you to go on the internet and I want you to find out how an otter is a keystone species. What effect does it have on the other species in its ecosystem? The third factor that promotes stability is having a large area, having a large habitat. That is so important for an ecosystem to be stable, because if the habitat shrinks, you're going to lose lots of valuable resources. So the larger the area, the better health the ecosystem will have. Now, natural resources are so important. They are what every species needs to survive. And there's two types of resources that the Earth provides: renewable and non-renewable natural resources. Renewable resources can be made more easily. So we can get those resources again. So like wind, food, trees, etc. Those are things that are renewable. They keep happening. We can plant more trees, we can get more food, etc. Non-renewable resources are resources that cannot easily be made, such as oil, because it takes millions of years to have those fossil fuels, because you need organisms to become fossils to be able to get that and produce the oil. Metals, coal, minerals, things like that are all non-renewable. Once we use them up, we can't get them back. Here are some examples of kind of a spectrum of natural resources. So on the left, you can see renewable natural resources, and on the right side, you can see some examples of non-renewable natural resources. Go ahead and copy a few of these down in your notes. Now, there are many things that can disrupt an ecosystem. Pollution, for example, can be very harmful for an ecosystem. Anything in the air, water, or soil that is potentially harmful to animals or plants is the definition of pollution. Too much pollution disrupts the balance in nature. Some effects are acid rain, like you saw in the introduction video of The Simpsons, the greenhouse effect, which can cause global warming, and the depletion of the ozone layer, which can allow harmful UV rays coming into our ecosystem. Now, acid rain is something that can potentially be extremely dangerous. Our normal rainfall has a pH of about 5.6. Acid rain has a pH of 3.8. Acid rain is caused by the burning of fossil fuels that release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and it mixes with the rainwater. And it can cause acidification of lakes and streams, it can damage trees, and it can destroy soils. So think about the effect of the pH on enzymes when we did the lab. Having a too basic or too acidic pH can affect how an enzyme works. Also, having the acid in the ecosystem, that's going to affect everything that it touches. So it's going to affect, it's going to get into the water, which is what feeds the plants take in that water, animals take in that water, so it's going to destroy a lot of the ecosystem. You can see here in this diagram how acid rain is kind of created and where it ends up. This is a cycle, sort of like when we looked at the water cycle or the carbon cycle. It's going to affect the water cycle, but the carbon cycle also plays a big effect because of the carbon dioxide that goes up in the atmosphere as well. I want you to copy down this cycle into your notes. You don't need to draw all of the pictures like you see. You don't need to have a beautiful factory or a boat on the water, but go ahead and draw this cycle and label the different parts. So acid rain, in addition to causing problems with the water, it can also speed up the decay of buildings, materials, and paints, including irreplaceable buildings and statues and sculptures. So things that we have around the world that are of historical importance to us can be destroyed by acid rain. Other disruptions to our ecosystem health are carcinogens. Carcinogens are a cancer-causing agent, and they're generally found in industrial chemicals that get released into the air and water. The next disruption is ozone depletion. The ozone layer surrounds our Earth, and it's getting a kind of a big hole in it. It was a bigger problem before. We've tried to fix it by having less things that have CFCs. CFCs are chlorofluorocarbons, and you find them in things like hairspray bottles or aerosol bottles. And it can lead to health problems such as skin cancer, because if there's a big hole in the ozone, we're going to get those UV rays coming in. It could also help to increase global warming, which is not a good thing for our environment. So global warming is the warming of the environment, and it can change patterns in our rainfall and the amount of water stored in glaciers and ice caps. Right now, we're kind of going through this big drought in California, which can be a major problem. But if our ice caps and our glaciers melt, it can cause ocean and lake levels to rise, which means that living here in the Bay Area, we're at a pretty low sea level. There could be, we might not have Belmont anymore in the future. So we really want to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to prevent global warming from occurring. Groundwater pollution is another disruption to our environment. Much of the water that we use is in groundwater, and it's so easy to contaminate it. So we want to make sure that we are not flushing chemicals down the drains. We want to be really careful with our water. We may have to find other sources of water if we continue to use it up and to contaminate it. Another disruption is having enough energy. Finding energy will become a problem. We are running out of our fossil fuels that we use for gasoline, and we're polluting the air. Nuclear energy can be used, but it could be very harmful if there were a meltdown or explosion at the plant. Look at what happened with our radish seeds that were exposed to radiation. We really want to be careful about using nuclear energy or radiation or radioactive materials. Next, we do need to start exploring other types of energy, like wind energy, hydroelectric power, or solar power. Even though these can be great alternatives, you have to be really careful about what you're using them for. A lot of the wind turbines cause a lot of deaths in hawks and eagles. Solar power can be a great source of energy, but in Panoche Valley in California, they are putting a bunch of solar panels over empty grasslands, which you might think, oh, okay, that's not such a big deal. We're going to get solar power out of this. But it is affecting a lot of endangered species that live in those grasslands. So there's lots to consider when you're looking at alternative types of energy. Here you can see energy consumption in the United States by source. And most of our energy that we get is from petroleum, which is a non-renewable source of energy. What I'd like for you to do with this slide is I want you to write down the highest numbers of non-renewable energy that we use, as well as what is another source of energy that we can use that is renewable. Now, extinctions are also extremely disruptive to environments because, again, certain species can have such an important role in the ecosystem. And extinctions are when species are disappearing from our ecosystems. It's causing great imbalances, and there's chances for us to learn of potential benefits of these organisms, and we don't know what benefits they might have until they're gone. And so we really want to be careful with what we're doing is affecting different species. Topsoil leaching is another disruption to the ecosystem. We need topsoil for agriculture. If we leach all the nutrients from the soil, there's not going to be enough to grow food at low cost. And so we're going to have a harder time getting our food that we need in order to survive, especially since we have growing population. Human population is exploding. We have currently about 7.5 billion people on the world. And the more people we have, the more resources we need, the more land we need. And so that could be killing different species, it can be causing this pollution to the environment. So we really need to start thinking about what we can do to make sure that our ecosystems are healthy and that it can support all of us and our families. So what can we do? We can reduce the amount of waste that we produce. We can reuse and recycle. We can conserve water. And make sure that you don't dump into storm drains. Don't pour chemicals or things down into the drain because it goes out into the ocean. It goes into our groundwater. You want to make sure that you also don't buy harmful or wasteful products. Don't buy things in individually wrapped containers. You can use reusable bags and divvy things out to bring in your school lunches. Also, don't support companies that are polluters, because if we support them and buy their products, they're going to continue to pollute our environment.